checking out the only game where the icier the roads get, the faster I slip down the slope to insanity. It's GTA. We want to put cars against icy roads, and so it's time for a brand new challenge. Channeling the inverse of everything that is Floridian, we're going to put different cars up against icy-style roads. Of course, it's never just the icy roads, whether or not it's an entire mafia crew of snowmen transforming Christmas trees or heat-seeking mulberry bushes. I have to try and get to the end of this and find out which vehicle could possibly compete all the stupidity. The only problem is, just like some sort of Michigan winter, all the cars are buried, so I never know which one I'm gonna get. So now I have to try the randomized cars to complete this challenge, or just, I don't know, take a snow day for the rest of my life. Anyway, folks, let's do this. These are the cars I get.
The last video I put out was about the index of refraction. It talked about why light slows down when it passes through a medium, and in particular, why the rate of slowdown would depend on color. It turns out people have a lot of questions about the index of refraction, and in this supplemental video I wanted to take a chance to answer a couple of them. For example, how is it possible for this index to be lower than 1, which seems to imply that light would travel faster than the speed of light through some materials. To kick things off though, I want to take a question that does not require too much background, asked by Kevin O'Toole, which is, why exactly light slowing down would imply that it bends as it enters a medium?
Alex and Danny.
There's a common analogy, which is to think of something like a car or a tank, where it turns a little bit while one side of it slows down before the other. And although it's a very visceral and memorable analogy, it's not like light has wheels, and it also tells you nothing about how to be more quantitative, and derive the formula describing exactly how much light bends. Here's a better way to think about it. If you have some light wave shining into a material like glass, if it slows down, notice how that means that it gets kind of scrunched up. If its wavelength in a vacuum was some number lambda, then the wavelength inside this material, where it's gotten slowed down, is something smaller than...
Okay. I want to do this, and I'm going to rip it with this, because I'm going to pull this off on some latitudinal Warcliffe line here about salt water and sugar water, which is his whole thesis. I've been watching and staying in step with it, and I have no idea how to program any of this, mind you, which is a huge problem. I know between Benny Eater and 3B1 here, I need that breadboard computer to be able to pull off what I'm not going to just crash into is this colony collapse for you know, getting in here. Here I'm trying to do the Holtman program for Droid OS on a so I have to be specific about what type of equipment before any one of those, not just Droid, but which version of Droid, or whether it's C++ or how to route that correctly, is not a ball. It's not a ball wave in any. There is way too much going on here to what I needed to do for what it to understand. And what I'm trying to explain to somebody like 3B or any of the other when I'm doing something like this, is to say, well, the reason why it's so critically important is because you guys get so far out is this accelerating frame where this medium is the initial gap. Now again, here's this program. I have it in here. It's installed. And I'm working it, other than my system having crashed and I gotta nuke my computer again and then reset up everything. So it's as clean and tight as I can possibly get it, so I have enough memory, RAM, CPU power, whatever I need it to be at that point in time, a fire extinguisher to make sure she doesn't burst into flames, passes through the wall. Some imp current decided to get a little crazy in the Book of Goatius today. But that's that gold chip. Not only is that the program, but start so much here. When you know somebody's like, you drop them a ball, you play the game with them, and they get the score, there's your $1,000 chip. That red shifts and blue shifts this quite considerably. To put an expert on that, there's a reason. There's an and or why logic about why the big boss needs to break it down to the 00 SCP space. For me, on the other hand, that's like dropping some, I don't have Astartes over there, and you just coming up on the other side and haven't figured out without training, without anything, without even how to service maintenance, anything with, I'm glad that I have some. probably would get you farther than somebody's like, well, can you get the Droid system to program or any form of those that works? Because there might be multiple of them. Which one's best? And if you have an Anubis or something to walk you through that 7-day process for 8 hours, for an hour a day, for 2 hours a day, for 3 hours a day, you're going to make very different math, lambda calculus that is super critical to understand about why you start with the system and determine the inputs and the outputs. Here I'm kind of taking E and I'm turning it into a battery, or I'm turning it into a power source line that says it homogenizes it at that point. And here he's saying that X-rays, the bones, here this one-dimensional line, could move faster geodesically, because what comes next is a relative. It's in a superposition, a Q-learning, or the RAM to the CPU to the DPU, TPU, QPU, which is quantum computing, which is still a physical space. What the RAM is to the CPU is a RAM with CPU, is a DPU, is a GPU, in the way before some of that routing in the electron microscope of what's going down on that Intel or IBM chip. I got them in here somewhere, down here lower. Is me generally working that model. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, me just generally working that there. So they'll really get into it, and they'll get on it with a microscope here. When what this is doing is still 1 and 0, there's a heat about that. That's just the fancy magic at the atomic level of where we make quantum gravity work. But in the end, is it 2 parts better? Once this, there's got to be reasons that the graphing calculator is better. So that's what that logic Y diagram is doing, or some Feynman diagram of it splitting, and that transistor, which is a very, very tiny part, which is even a tinier part of the whole code program, or what it could be capable of, because remember, all those extra routes are still running. I mean, you can't reprogram this. This isn't an EEPROM or an EEPROM. But what it does do is have some of those capabilities wired deep down in Catalyst down here somewheres. And because of that, there's always this speed of light constant that comes with that causal in the form of lambda. And that's such a trip. Much like file, just try to take that back down. It's a kind of a 2-part superposition problem of understanding, from 3B, he's going to want those plushies, because where they make collisions is as important as this line, because it says there's some type of medium in there that has changed the wave function, and so I have to change that wave function as well. Not to say that numbers of collisions here, but when I'm very controlled about the uncertainty on that, it gives me a better wave function. Right now, that wave function is starting to be out. So either some portion of that Penz row or A delta B operating system, input, system, output, happening there at Laplace at some level, some rate of change on a logarithm that I don't know how to program. Colony collapse here, just trying to get in.
More than that. Here I am drawing the wave only on a one-dimensional line.
And absolutely, this can be done on your paper copies. There you see the individual HTT program that I might have had for it. Let's come back here, and what I'm changing the medium was what he gave me there. Mathematically, that'll still continue, or at least factorial change. This is darker blue. It's still in the context of what it was. I don't know. Neil, not right now, Neil. Let's come back to these books on a one-dimensional line. What I'm doing, see, QPU, obviously not a supercomputer, but once you open this, and you're not used to a stone cutter's technique, a training manual, and some political land nav stuff to deal with like that, you kind of see that this was the first, but the basic RAM chip that I make, or this 6502 or 6205 chip, the MOS, has some basic logic gates into it, specifically logic gates. This one has it in it. But they're not comprehensive in the way where it wouldn't get much past the TPU or DPU's process. And, relatively speaking, in relative to the object, here's a machine that runs with TPU chips. Here's one that has a DPU chip in it. They're still unitasked under that system against what quantum computing is bridging that smooth quantum barrier about particle designs here that says, in the initial system, the CPU in itself is this program. Stack packs, program code. So that means input the cut codes that I give you, or board factory, stone mill, grocery store, sales inventory, whatever it is. That's your two jobs. You stack shelves, you take orders, you stack packs. What comes with that is a C code program, that everything in here can be this C code, G code, and M code to the CNC machine. Cut windows, limits, where are those approximations? Because, technically Gaussian, I can run that right off into infinity without any distributions or capitulations in that form, but they may become relative. To the A delta B here, what is this NP, this military run, or the policing 3B, or me? I'm not really sure. It's only in nature to that relativity that I'm going to agree with 3B on this one to hold A, the first mechanics you're going to have to check here, so our operating systems are the same, and we have at least this, even though we don't know how to program it, becomes what we're looking for. I'm sure I got one in here somewhere, some wave function, or why that operator radial has that 45 is very small inside of here about what we're trying to do. But I'm running that line. We're taking this medium, we're putting it through this medium, which have rank and file reasonings, which when you're talking to people psychologically could be high or low. When that medium is the same question again, and that's applied to a different form, well, that certainly changes that. And if you're taking this and you hit that medium, you're certainly going to slow down, or at least that will bend. That's going to start to creep down during the day when you say, well, empty pallets first hour. Empty pallets for an 8-hour day on the shoulder of the human body, over calculus, whether I like to admit it or not, that even though it took me an hour to do wrap, bag, and tag, all that stuff in the logs, the mods, the periods, every time it seems consistent between that unit that it takes 1 hour is on this factorial that starts to stretch. And not only day over day, but 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, into a year over year that doesn't have that initial transition start anymore, is a mass gap that you need to help determine. I usually do the first 90 days, or Roman or Argarius, Jesus, in 3 days, E2 to E8 in 3 days, right? Like, you come in, you're an exoponent that solves that logarithm, and so it's still heavy, right? I'm still stripping that down to the E2 that says, be here, field charge stuff, don't get in fist fights, 18 to 80, that's in the basic window. I can train you to do anything after that point in time. Maybe you show a middle ground bar to that. You're coming up 0, not -1, but not double operator in a Hofmann space. Add straight up to the ones that usually, when it comes through the rest of this promotion, come through this operating series. Run speeds, heart rate monitors, the interrogation chamber, 2 heart rate monitor on run speeds about that run. What else we doing here? This is certainly going to change once I do figure out how to pull that off of the machine, reprogram it or program it the first time to input it. But once it's programmed and on there, I'm within the operating spaces and code limits unless I change those routes or reprogram them, which would come into more extra inefficient usage of pixels. So it's an art as much as it is a science, I guess, is what I'm getting at.